Hi guys, today we're going to learn about conditionals in Python. We're first going to start off with comparators, then we're going to move on to if, elif, and else statements, and lastly we'll do the logical operators. So first let's start off with the comparators. So there are 6 that you should be knowing. The first one is going to be the greater than, then we have less than, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, not equal to, and equal to. And these comparators would work the same way you would expect them to work in a math class. So let's look at this example over here. So here I have 4 different variables that all have a integer value assigned to them. And I have this statement that says print A is greater than B. So we know that A is 17 and B is 29. 17 is not greater than 29, so that means that this is a false statement. So I will put in a false, which is what's going to be printed to our console. Next, I have B is greater than A. So again, B is 29 and A is 17. 29 is greater than 17, which means that this is going to be a true statement. Next, I have B is equal to C. So B is 29 and I know C is 31. 29 is not equivalent to 31, which means that this is a false statement. And it's important to note here that I have used a double equal sign to compare 2 values. When you're comparing 2 values, you have to be using a double equal sign. If you use a single equal sign, that's for assignment, as you can see up here. So make sure you are using a double equal sign if you want to compare 2 numbers. So if I run this, you can see that what's printed to my console matches up to what I have over here. And now let's try these other 3 examples. So you can try these on your own if you want. And now we'll go over them. So the first one says C is not equal to D. So for C I have 31 and D is 17. So 31 and 17 are not equivalent to each other, which means that the statement is true. So next I have A is greater than or equal to D. So I know A is 17 and D is also 17. 17 is greater than or equal to 17, which means that this is also going to be a true statement. Okay, next I have C is less than or equal to B. I know that C is 31 and B is 29. And 31 is not less than or equal to 29, which means that this is going to be a false statement. So if I run this, I can see that the last couple of things that are printed out to our console match what we have over here. So we can use these comparators in our if, elif, and else statements. So what an if, elif, and else statement is that it's going to evaluate a certain condition, and based on whether that condition is true or false, it will do an action, which is noted down below here. So how this is going to work is we're first going to look at the first statement here. So I have this first condition that says Percy is greater than Annabeth. So if this is true, we're going to evaluate this condition down here. If this isn't true, we're going to go down here and we're going to evaluate this. If this ends up to be true, we're going to print out this part here. But if this also ends up being false, we're going to go to the else and we are going to print this statement here. So let's look at this example more closely. So here I have 5 people, each with a different numerical value associated with them. So this value is going to be their age. So I have Percy is 17, Annabeth is also 17, Nico who is 15 years old, Hazel is 14, and Luke is 22. So in this if, elif, else statement, I can see that my first condition is Percy is greater than Annabeth. So Percy and Annabeth both have the value of 17. So this statement is going to be false because 17 is not greater than 17, which means that this statement will not be printed. We're going to go over to this condition now and evaluate this. And we have elif written here because we are evaluating more than one condition. So for our elif, we're going to see if Percy is less than Annabeth. So 17 is not less than 17 again, so this is going to be false, which means that we will not be printing out this statement down here. We're going to move on over to our else. Okay, so because our first 2 statements were false, we are going to evaluate the else and we will have to print out Percy is the same age as Annabeth, which again, it makes sense with our variables up here. So if I run this, I should get Percy the same age as Annabeth. You may not need this for your warm-up, but it's also important to see that you can use nested if statements as well. So here I have an if statement here inside of an if statement. So again, this works the same way as this one earlier. Basically, if the first condition is false, the next condition will evaluate itself. So let's look at this again. So this one says if Nico is greater than Hazel. So we know that Nico is 15 and Hazel is 14. If Nico is greater than Hazel, we're going to print Nico is older than Hazel. And that's correct. This statement is going to be true because 15 is greater than 14, which means we will end up printing Nico is older than Hazel. Now, because this ends up being true, we're going to move on over to this if statement on the inside. This one says if Nico is greater than Percy, so that is going to be false because 15 is not greater than 17, which means this statement will not evaluate. Instead, we would have to print out this statement because this condition ended up being false. So we print it out, but not older than Percy, which again makes sense with the variables that we have up here. So if I run this, you can see I have printed out Nico is older than Hazel, but not older than Percy. So again, that matches our prediction. So another thing to note is that you don't have to just use numbers for if statements, you can also use text. So for example, let's do something with, let's make an if statement using text. So I'm just going to write out a variable. I'm going to say ability equals, we'll say archery. I'm going to declare this as a string. Okay, and then we're going to say if ability equals, remember our double equal sign, if ability equals archery, then I'm going to do my colon. We're going to say if ability equals archery, we're just going to print out your godly parent is Apollo. Okay, and then we might have to evaluate another condition. We'll say elif ability equals fire. Then we'll say, or we'll do water instead. We'll say print your godly parent is Poseidon. And we can also have an else statement, and we can say if none of those are true, we can just print out you are not a demigod. So again, if we look at this, we see that our variable ability is initialized to the string archery, and here we are comparing if ability equals archery, which it is, then we will print out your godly parent is Apollo. So let's see if this works as intended. So I run this, we see we got your godly parent is Apollo. That's correct. However, if I switch this to water, let's say I put water here instead, this first condition is going to end up to be false because ability is not equivalent to archery. So this condition is false, and we are going to skip over to this. This one says ability equals water. That is going to be a true statement, so we will print out this statement down here. We will say your godly parent is Poseidon. So if we run this, you can see now it says switch to Poseidon, which makes sense. And lastly, if I had changed this to none, let's say they don't have any powers, again, this first statement ends up being false because that's not equivalent to archery. The second statement ends up being false as well because it's not equivalent to water. Therefore, we would have to evaluate this else statement down here, and we would have to print out you are not a demigod. So let's see if that is the case. And yeah, so we got that statement as well, and yeah, everything works, so we're good. So the last thing we're going to learn today are the logical operators. So logical operators are used to combine statements. So the logical operators that you will learn about today are and, or, and not. So it's important to know that if we have two true statements and we're trying to combine two true statements with an and operator, we're going to end up with true. We're going to result in true. So again, if we do this with two false conditions, we're going to end up with a false as well. So I'm going to write that out really quickly. So we have false and false, then we're going to end up with false. So if we have one condition that's true and one condition that's false, then we're going to end up with false. So similarly, we can do the same thing using the or operator. So if our first condition is going to be true or our second condition is true, we are going to get true. If we do this with both being false with the or operator, we are going to get false. If we have one equivalent to true and the other equivalent to false, we are going to get true. So that's a difference between the or and the and. So you can see here we have a difference. And lastly, the not is pretty simple. All not does is just take the opposite. So not true would be false, and not false would be true. So these are important to remember, and we can do some examples right now. So here I have some examples. We are going to start off with this one up here. Okay, so here I have four variables again. I have x, y, z, and k. Each of them have a different value. And here I have my statement, which I want to print out, and here I have used a comparator. So here I have used the logical comparator of or. So let's try and evaluate this. The first part says x is greater than y. So we know that x is 23 and y is 45. So 23 is not greater than 45, which means that this is going to be false. So let's put in false here. And then our second part says y is greater than z. So y is 45, z is 3, and that is true because 45 is greater than 3. So I'm going to write in true down here. So if we evaluate false or true, we are going to get true. Okay, now let's do the next one. This one is using the and logical operator. So if we evaluate the first condition, this one says y is equal to z. So y is 45 and z is 3. 45 is not equal to 3, so this is going to be false for the first condition. The next one we have x is less than y. So x is 23 and y is 45. 45 is greater than 23, which means that this is true. So here we have a false and true, and if you recall from before, false and true is going to evaluate to false. Okay, so our last one is not z is less than or equal to 3. So we know that z is 3. So is 3 less than or equal to 3? And that is true. So we have true. So not true is going to be the opposite. So we're going to have false. So if we try to run this, we get true, false, false, which again matches what we have over here. So here we have true, false, false. Okay. And we're going to do the same thing with these three conditions. So try these on your own and we can check back in. Okay, so hopefully you try them on your own, and we'll do these now. So the first one says x is equal to k. So x is 23 and k is 0. 23 is not equal to 0, so this statement is going to be false. Now I'm using my or logical operator, so I'm going to write that down there. And now I have y is greater than z. So y is 45 and z is 3. 45 is greater than 3, so that is also a true statement. So now I have false or true, which again is going to evaluate to true. Okay, so the next one we have here is x is greater than or equal to y. So x is 23 and y is 45. So 23 is not greater than or equal to 45, which means that this is going to be false. And I'm going to write down my AND operator there. And our second statement says x is less than k. So x is 23 and k is 0. So 23 is not less than 0, so that is going to be false as well. So if I have false and false, I'm going to end up with one false. So again, let's do this statement down here. This one says not z not equals 3. So first I'm going to write down my operator, that's not, and now let's evaluate this condition here. This one says z is not equal to 3. Up here we can see that z equals 3, so since z equals 3, this statement is going to be false. So a not false is going to give us the opposite of false, which is going to be true. So hopefully you got those, and if we run this, you can see we have true, false, true, which again matches what we have over here. Okay, so now going back to our age program, we can do the same thing here as well, using the operators. So here you can see I have the same people with their ages, except I added another person, Reina, who is 16. So here I have 3 different if statements here which we can evaluate. So the first one we're going to evaluate is Reina is greater than Nico and Reina is greater than Hazel. So if we look over here, we know that Reina is 16 and Nico is 15. So 16 is greater than 15, so that's going to be true. And I have my AND logical operator. And then I have Reina is greater than Hazel. Reina is 16, Hazel is 14. That is a true statement. So I'm going to type in true as well. And now we know that true and true is going to give us true, which means that this whole statement evaluates to true. So that means that this statement is going to be printed. Okay, so moving on, I have here not Reina equals 17. So I'll put in not because that is our operator, and then our condition is Reina equals 17. So Reina is 16, and 16 is not equivalent to 17, which means this statement is false. So not false is going to give us true because that is the opposite. So again, this entire statement is going to evaluate to true, and it will print Reina is not 17. So try this last one on your own, and we can check back in later. Okay, so this one says Reina is less than Luke or Reina is greater than Nico. So Reina is 16 years old, and again Luke is 22. And 16 is not less than 22, so that's going to be false. Or no, sorry. So Reina is 16, Luke is 22. 22 is greater than 16, so this is going to be true. And I'm going to write down my OR operator, and then here I have Reina is greater than Luke, Reina is greater than Nico, so 16 is greater than 15, again that is true, so true or true should give us true again. Again, this entire statement has evaluated to true, which means that this statement will be printed. So if I run this, you can see that all 3 of these statements have printed out because all of these conditions have evaluated to true. So there's that. Okay, so hopefully this video gave you a better understanding of conditionals. These will be really useful in the future when you work on your future projects like the BuzzFeed quiz. It can be really helpful there. So I hope you've learned something, and I'll see you next video. Bye!